welcome to episode 12 of Spill the RT. How are you, Josh?
Hey, I'm good. Hey, folks, episode 12. Did you hear that? Episode 12. How you doing, Eamonn?
Sure, I'm grand. What's coming up on today's show, Josh?
So this week, the first Benin bronzes were returned directly to the Oba of Benin. Climate protesters finally get jail time. Rembrandt's gold luster has been decoded at last. And we've got two stories about art and the Olympics. All this and more coming up next.
Oh, amazing. But Josh, what should we do before we continue?
Well, as this is episode 12, and you don't want to losing out on episode 13, then you want to like, share, subscribe, give to your friends, send them emails. You know the deal.
Get the word out there, folks. We need to
Get the word
share
out, damn
this
it.
tea. Excellent. So today we are joined by a very special guest. You've seen her before on Spill the RT, but she was so good, so exciting, so entertaining. We're bringing her back. Ladies and gentlemen, and all those from all creeds, please welcome Miss Katrina Tracuma.
Hi guys.
Woo.
Hello to
Hey.
everyone watching.
I feel like I was announcing you as some sort of WWE kind of boxer.
I know, I felt the energy. I was like, it's time
Yeah,
to
it's-
get physical.
I had to get you some sort of intro song as you come down into the ring. You know, we're gonna
And a
bring in
cape.
some.
I'd
And
need
a
a cape
cape.
as well, please.
Well,
yeah.
you need the cape, absolutely.
the
You
cape.
know, that's where all the power comes from the cape. Get you on House of the Dragon. Have your cape. So today we are going to go straight into it as usual. Katrina, we'll talk to you about your work a little later on in the show. But Josh, where are we going to first?
So first today we're going to Iowa, of all places, where the Iowa Museum, the Stanley Museum of Art in the University of Iowa's Stanley Museum of Art, on July 15th was the first institution to hand over directly to the Oba of Benin some Benin bronzes. And for those who don't know, these are thousands and thousands of brass, bronze, and ivory objects that were stolen from the Kingdom of Benin, which is what Nigeria was known as back in 1897. And they've been dispersed around the world. They're in all different kinds of museums, all different kinds of locations. And it's been a great deal of controversy over the years. This has been one of the biggest sort of post-colonial, trying to decolonialize sort of the museum industry, because so many of these pieces are out there, and Nigeria wants them back. And so basically what happened a couple years ago, Nigeria said, okay, the Oba is the traditional caretaker of these objects. Traditionally, this is the person who would decide who could borrow them for lending out to an institution, for example. And so the big deal about this is the first time that an institution is literally kind of directly bypassing the government and going directly to the Oba and saying, here, now this is yours, and now you decide what happens to this.
Okay, interesting. I mean, like this has come up in the last couple of weeks already with
Yes.
the British Museum and the colonialization of the coins there, and what has happened there. But I mean, like, is this how things should go forward? Do you reckon that this is going to be like the start of something new in other gallery spaces and other museums where they're going to potentially realign where things are supposed to go back to?
Well, apparently this has happened before. This is not the first time that these have been returned. The Smithsonian
Sure.
in Washington, the Metropolitan Museum in New York, Dublin's National Museum of Ireland, museums across Germany, apparently all have returned at least some of their bronzes in the past, but that was to the government of Nigeria rather than kind of directly to this more kind of cultural center, which I think is the way to think about what the Oba represents. That Nigeria is a
Okay.
kind of civil government, right? But the Oba really represents kind of cultural agency over these objects. And it was kind of taken from the Oba back in 1897. And so now being returned to the current Oba is bringing things full circle, and really then becomes, as was said in the article about this, it's now up to the Oba. The Oba said he wants to
Yeah.
lend these out, but it's his choice now as to where they go
Where
and
they
to
go.
whom they're lent, rather than that being made externally by these other institutions.
It kind of does show a bit of hope, though, doesn't it, as to where other museums could take on board this in the future. You know, it has that element of hope in it, I think.
Well, I think, yeah, that, for sure. I mean, the issue would be, right, that if an institution is willing to give up, well, then they can also get back. And that's really kind of the point here, right? Like, it should be the Oba's decision, get them back, not just in the context of this particular set of pieces, right? There's many, many other pieces that are in collections around the world where we know people want them back in different ways. So you give them back, art has a right to circulate, right? Art is a
Mm,
common cultural heritage to us all. We're going to talk about this next here in a minute with the next story coming up. And so to me, the idea is not that you're limiting, but you're giving agency back to people who then make those decisions themselves on their own behalves. What do you think,
yeah.
Katrina?
Well, not to shatter the hopeful image, because at first as well, when I read the story, I was like, fantastic, this is good news. I have nothing to say. Like, as usual, our brains are like wired to, we have more to say and concentrate on when it comes to negative things. And then when it's good news, it's like, yay! Okay, what else? But then I looked into it a bit, and I saw this report from Business Insider about the actual craftsmen that are still existing that work in this way, making these objects. And there's only about 40 of them remaining. And there was this specific craftsperson that they interviewed for this Business Insider piece. And his concern, what he was expressing, was that, okay, there's all this international attention on returning these objects. There's a lot of money being put forward from their country to have them come back. And his qualm is like, well, what about actually investing and supporting us now, currently? Because they're actually struggling. There's like this main street where these craftsmen work that used to be densely populated with all these artisans. And now
Mm.
there's like 40 of them, and they're struggling. Like, they're in these little huts working away, and purchasing bronze is very difficult for them because it's not when this tradition began. And as you mentioned before, how it was the Oba who determined who were these craftspeople. Like, he gave them the name, and specifically this craftsperson's even surname. Like, that's what it means. It's the title. Like, his family, he's like whatever generation craftsman. His family has carried this name, this honor of being this craftsperson. And the government now doesn't help them with like the bronze. They have to put the money forward to buy the bronze. And he was mentioning like how much it costs, and if it's like so many thousands, they can't afford it. So what does he do now? Like, he needs like 30,000 just to buy this metal to create this object. And then also moving forwards, yes, okay, he creates the object, and then they sell. He was mentioning figures of like $500, $600 to somebody who then sells it to the people like more internationally and to the collectors. And then so the reseller would be getting like tens of thousands of dollars.
Mm,
And this person, who's the living continuation of this bloodline, of this family of chosen people by the Obe to create these objects, is getting a teensy tiny small fraction of all the money circulating, you know. And then as well, I'm just thinking about the corruption that we know is
mm.
high in Nigeria. Like, there's problems with that, like, for decades. So, not to kind of dull the sunshine, happy news of, yes, these objects coming back, there are other concerns, you know?
Yeah, it's a very interesting point because I think we tend to think of these as being historical objects, right? That what's
Mm,
being returned and not in the context of modern production. And so what struck me is just we again and again on this podcast is this idea of supporting living artists, right? Whether we're talking about living artists in Africa, living artists in
yeah.
Europe, living artists in North America, it's this idea that somehow once the art is separated from the maker, that's where the value is, and the maker somehow
Mm,
doesn't matter, right? Like
yeah.
that's what's creating it. It doesn't exist
Mm-hmm.
without a living person to make it. So that's
Definitely.
really definitely an interesting angle on this.
Yeah. Like, it's
Yeah,
good
but so,
it's going
so
to be returning, and people in their local museums, because there is actually a deficit of these objects in their own, like, local communities because they were so pillaged. So them returning these objects hopefully would also inspire the next generation of craftsmen to continue on the legacy. But, above inspiration, you need funds to pay for
mm,
shelter, food, and then inspiration and
mm,
creativity can come afterwards. Like, they still should put an effort to take care of these
mm,
living cultural heritage preservers.
mm. It's quite upsetting that they're still being shafted, and that there isn't any sort of framework in place for us to say that, okay, well, the person who's making it or preserving it should be getting a bigger cut, and at the very least, a proper credit for that as well. That is really interesting, and I think that's something that we will look back on again. And I think that tea has been spilt on that story. But now we're going to go to two Just Stop Oil activists, Phoebe Plummer and Anna Holland, and they have been found guilty of criminal
Yes.
damage. And they've been squashing tomatoes all across the world recently, destroying whatever artwork they could find. Where are we
Yeah.
going?
This is what drives me crazy about these activists. I don't disagree with their position. I disagree completely with their tactics. Right? We're talking about art as a common historical connection for all of us. And these people are deliberately trying to like mess with I'll just call them the two twits. They're deliberately trying to mess with things that aren't they don't belong to them. Right? And
Oh
it goes
dear.
beyond that. How does putting tomato sauce on Van Gogh stop oil production? The logic of this makes no sense whatsoever, right? Like glue yourself to an oil tanker, make that your art project. Do something that's actually
Absolutely.
going to disrupt. But doing this kind of nonsense in places over and over again, Stonehenge, Van Gogh, it makes no sense to me. You're literally self defeating yourself because the people you want on your side look at this and go, you deserve jail. I support conservative governments because of it. You're literally screwing yourself out of your own supporters.
The only thing that I can think of that why there might be a purpose of this is that it's sunflowers and there's sunflower oil. But like, I mean, that's totally against the point. So it's like
Who gives
missing the point. And then I mean they went into we saw this earlier before as well. We had the Mona Lisa who was ketchuped.
yeah, it's
It's just what the what the
with
F?
the Van Gogh at least was under glass, right? So the painting itself
Yes.
didn't get damaged, but the frame itself is like 300 or 400 years old and was made by a craftsman and is an artisan piece and is
Yeah.
historical. And I
Mm-hmm.
just the logic of any of this makes no sense to me. You want to put your body on the line, cool. You want to super glue yourself to the wall all around the Van Gogh to make a spectacle of yourself, awesome, go for it. Damaging an object that is not yours, that existed before you showed up, and that should exist long after you're gone for other people who aren't even here yet. It's just it's literally it's a kind of terrorism that I just cannot support.
I think what I kind of took from the article is what they were trying to say is that it's about like the protection of cultural heritage is what they have an issue with, and how much money that you're putting into protecting these artworks and not into our environment. And I mean, Katrina, you are quite the activist when it comes to environmental protection and climate action and all of that. Where do you sit with this?
I mean, I'm sort of just being drawn into both directions. I completely understand and empathize with the preservation of this culturally significant object. And as a painter, of course, like, it just, makes me have an emotional response.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's great that it was protected with the glass. From the article, as far as I know, it was back on display within like 2 days, so there wasn't major damage, even if some to the frame as well. So it did survive. I obviously, from the perspective of advertising tactics and just like media and
Yeah.
scandalous, article headlines, I understand why they're doing it this way. It is in part because of this visceral reaction. Because unfortunately, tying yourself or supergluing yourself to an oil tanker, that doesn't get on the news as much. Like, people are still doing it. Like, Greenpeace is still, with their ship in the ocean. Like, I know they're still doing that campaign, and that's going. But that doesn't make headlines. So it's kind of similarly how
No.
sex sells, and how this kind of, in part, ridiculous activity of destroying art, that's what gets on the news. But at the same time, it's what you, Josh, said about the divisive nature of such a campaign. That essentially the people who would be more, the environmentalists, the empaths, which are art lovers usually and art makers, feel then, begrudged and separated from this greater, like, goal of, cut the oil bullshit out. So yeah, I'm kind of understanding of why they're doing it that way, and it is working if people are talking about it. And there is also a discrepancy of the funds being, invested. As much as we like to complain about it, obviously, as artists, that there isn't enough money in the arts, but they do have a point in terms of how much has been allocated, how much more has been allocated, compared to, environmental campaigns. So I empathize with all sides. I'm not quite sure what the solution is. I mean, how rigid are also the security measures going to have to be in museums, I mean, boarding planes changed as well at a certain period, for everyone in terms of the
Yes.
liquid
Security.
restrictions. So hopefully, bags will be searched more. I don't know how even manpower in regards to manpower, how realistic that is in places like the Louvre or other museums.
Well, I can tell you this much. Galleries and museums are already switching over. They're firing curators. They're firing people that would be public accessible explanation kinds of roles, and they're hiring
Mm.
security people instead. Like the
Mm.
galleries in New York have completely switched their model. It's now much more make an appointment before we'll let you in. We want to know who you are. And I can certainly see private museums doing exactly the same kind of thing.
Mm.
Because why would you jeopardize what you have when this becomes the norm? And that's,
Yeah.
to me, that's the issue. I hear what you're saying about you want to be caught, you want to see spectacle, you want your cause to be promulgated, right? But particularly in the political realm, there has to be a connection between ways and means, and the ends
Mm.
don't justify how you get there sometimes. And that's what makes doing real political authentic action difficult, because you can always use the system against itself in certain ways, but then you also kind of lose your soul in certain ways along the way. And I just don't. Now, guess what? Now, public funds that will be going to fighting climate change are going to be taking care of these two people for what, 18 months or whatever, while they're in jail,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, their money's being spent, public money's being spent on them, which to me just kind of speaks to the kind of egotism and narcissism of this kind of political display,
Mm.
because it's not going to make anyone stop buying oil.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think a greater lobbying and change has to happen also. Like in the
Yeah.
realm of activism, there's always this kind of approach that everybody has their own place. Not everybody is equipped to be doing all the legal battles and writing all the petitions and then actually following them through in local government and then nationally and internationally. It is perhaps for some people extroverted, um, ego aware personas more like easier to do this, a kind of
Yeah.
blatant activistic performance of gluing yourself
Yeah.
to the wall and throwing something at something else. But it is probably a lot harder to do all the administrative and paper pushing stuff behind the scenes. But I
Yeah.
hope that the group of activists that these two people are from have more of the kind of resources that will help them do that kind of work. The behind the scenes stuff that nobody really sees or writes newspaper articles about, but that actually might incite
Hmm.
more realistic
Yeah.
change.
I'm a
yeah.
total cynic. Martyrdom is sexy. Martyrdom's easy because martyrdom is sexy. Martyrdom's not hard work,
Mm.
right?
Mm,
Hard work is doing exactly that daily grind of making a progressive cause actually progress.
yeah. And on that, we're
So,
going to progress. So,
goodbye. Goodbye, you two twits. Onwards.
they are gone. They are gone. I think there's a lot there that we can talk about, and we've spoken quite extensively about guerrilla marketing and guerrilla media attention and how we try to get attention for different causes. But now to talk about something a little bit more golden, we have had the revelation of how the Dutch master Rembrandt's Night Watch was painted in the process, and how it was painted from a couple of chemists who have done a little bit of research into that. Josh.
So, as usual, this is our section on applied science, right? For those that
Yes.
have seen the Night Watch, we can probably put up a shot of the Night Watch here. It has some very striking gold details, right? In ways that for the time seemed to be impossible to create simply because of how the actual gold luster appears against the black. And so there was these chemists from Holland's University of Amsterdam. See that? Research leads us to the forwards and to the backwards and everywhere else. They finally figured out, using high-tech spectroscopic technology, that they figured out the particular colors of yellows and orange reds and the particular chemical compounds that produced it. And basically, Rembrandt had to sort of make some choices and sort of used a bunch of arsenic and sulfur in ways that other people were not using them at the time. And that's what gives us these amazing kinds of striking gold tones in the piece. See, there's your science for the day.
There you go. You see, we're all about the education here at Spill the RT. So it was like it was a project at the Riet Museum in Amsterdam, and it had done like a huge amount of investigation work into this to see what it could come through, see what they could realize. And there was arsenic-based pigments. I think that's like, isn't that crazy? What a clever thing to do. How creative of him to even think like that. I think that's innately what we do as creatives, isn't it? We try and figure out ways that we can make things stand out, and I think this is a really good example of that. That it's not just now that happens.
Oh, in the context of the Renaissance, right, where there's not such a
Mm.
hard fix between sort of science and chemistry and like right trying to turn lead into gold and those kinds of
Yes.
things. And so a lot of these people ended up poisoning themselves, killing themselves because they were working with compounds that were really not the best to work with, but might have provided
Marie
some very
Curie.
interesting results, right? And so yeah, arsenic sulfide, probably not what I want to touch with my hand, but it damn looks good against a black background.
I wonder how it has lasted, or what way he had done that process in order for the coloring and the pigment to stay that way. You know, I wonder how that has not broken down in this length of time. I mean, this is going back quite some time. How it hasn't disintegrated or anything. Like, was it 17th century?
Yeah, 1670, 80, something like that. I
Mm.
think partly it's because it is a chemical compound, right? And so it's literally
Mm.
making a change onto the canvas and then fixing itself. But I am not a
Mm.
chemist, so I can't go beyond that.
Okay.
How about you,
And
Katrina? Any thoughts on this one?
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I'm glad that it's kind of a personal vindication of, all these talks of like, well, I've heard people say of why are there arts, for example, in STEM, how it should be STEAM. Like, what does art have to do with science? So this story to me is just like, ha, what do you mean? Like, especially painters, but I'm sure all the other materials, everything. There's so
Mm.
much science based stuff going on in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people do like on their painter profession level are a type of chemist. Like the amount of combinations of things you need to know and how pigments react, and which is why also it is great. I think when artists share, because oftentimes what happens is you live your whole life and you're like a baby painter when you've been doing it for like 10 years, and then you like sort of graduate into a toddler and a teenager, and then maybe if you're painting for like 40 years you're like, oh, I've mastered some kind of formula, and then it's like sometimes these formulas disappear, like for instance now with this example they disappeared with the maker, like we don't know. And then imagine if we just had this compendium compiled by artists of all these relating to our own chosen like material, all these concoctions. Like that would be amazing. So then people like 200 years from now, when they would be like a baby painter, all they'd have to do is like open up this compendium and be like, oh, I see
Yes.
Rembrandt. I see what
Yeah.
you did there. Also, Tintoretto, actually, they found the same
Right.
compound in his
Right.
pieces as well. So there is, it was at the time fashionable or known to, and we've kind of lost it. I mean, great that we're not using
Mm.
arsenic in our studios, but you know what I mean? Like the process. The process would be
No,
great to know, not necessarily the deadly chemical.
I think you're raising. I mean, for me, I'm not really interested in art history in terms of like the criticality of artists pushing certain ideas. I'm a materialist. I'm a technique
Mm,
person, right? And so
I hear
absolutely
you.
what I like is the convergent evolution that happens across time. And I always get into trouble when I do go to museums, not because I'm like looking at the piece from far away, because I'm trying to get too close and I want to see the
It's so close to
techniques
it.
and what
Yeah,
was
yeah.
done. Oh yeah, they're always like, "Get back away, sir, back away, sir." I promise I'm not gonna. I just want to see how it was done, right?
I just
Because
want to
I'm
smell
interested in
it. No
I
touching,
I,
just
I want to
smelling.
see I want to see how another maker has made. right? And I don't necessarily care about how that fits into the context of their time, because to me, these are techniques that I can use and repurpose and reuse again,
Definitely.
right?
Yeah.
And under a gas hood, I might want to use arsenic sulfide. If I might try that, right? But I would do it with a modern way that would keep me alive and not poisoned.
I love Eamon's
Yeah.
face. Just like horror.
Oh, I wear my feelings on the surface. It's like I am resonating with both sides here. I think the science thing, as we've learned from previous episodes, goes over my head. The making thing is definitely an exploration, a discovery of something that comes as I would go through things, not knowing a clue about what I'm actually doing, but just testing and playing and testing and playing and realizing this. I'm like, go make that again. Not a hope. I have no idea how to do it.
Right, that's the fun.
Yeah. So like when it comes to what you're talking about, Katrina, with like compounds and mineral changes and all of that kind of stuff, I'm like, oh, that sounds great. And I'm like, just put them all together in one spot and I'll try put that into that and that, see what happens. And that's where the creativity comes out for me anyway, personally. Yeah, so there's nothing scientific about me. But yeah, I think it's really cool. And I think it's cool that they've kind of, that we are in a position now to go back looking at historical pieces and unpack how they were made and how we can potentially make that compendium of knowledge and have our own little magic book of spells for when we go to make some processing, you know. And I think that's something that we can do with technologies now and with combined knowledge, you know. And I think the multidisciplinary thing is always a massive thing that I'm interested personally anyway, to see how we can cross over between them and how the creativity can intertwine between different disciplines. And I think that this is a really good example of that.
Yeah, I would call that artistic alchemy, right? It's not
Alchemy.
science, but
Yes.
it's artistic alchemy. The idea being
Mm.
that you don't necessarily know where it's going to end up either, and that's kind of part of the fun, right?
Yeah,
Like if I knew where I was going, that would be graphic design or work. That wouldn't be art.
exactly. Yeah. But that's it, I suppose. And like we can only be inspired, and that's it. Okay, Josh is
Yep.
spilling the tea, so let's spill it with him. Let's get it all over the floor. Right. Let's hope there's no arsenic in your tea, Josh, because you know you won't be here for
It could
next week.
happen.
And speaking of which, next week we will be having a review week, and we're looking back at all of the artists that we've had on board for the last number of episodes. So stay tuned for that really cool highlights reel that will be out on the following episode. And then coming up after that, we have Christina Gagan, who will join us to talk about her work. And we'll also be giving you lots of information about our upcoming exhibition, our virtual show, which will be revealed very soon. But before we continue, let's give you a little bit of information about what's happening with Nua Collective. Here we go. So, Nua Collective, we are a visual arts community home to 20 artists and hundreds of their artworks with fresh work added weekly. Our Nua journal featuring articles and podcasts also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And of course, our beautiful print publications highlighting our collaborative collections are available for sale on our website at www.nuacollective.com. So add those publications, those beautiful print publications, to your library. Blackout, our international touring exhibition, is currently showing at the Green Sheep Studio in Thurles, County Tipperary, Ireland, until the 23rd of August. Do see Lucy Lamb, the beautiful, wonderful gallery director who's been on this show before and will be back on again in the future. But do check out her wonderful cafe/art gallery there, and you'll be able to check out the Blackout exhibition for the next couple of weeks. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on us spilling the art tea on our
No
weekly
FOMO.
roundups
No
every
FOMO.
Monday. No FOMO. So do like, subscribe, share, get it out to all of your friends. We need people to see this so that they can all learn about the magical world of the arts. Amazing. So, with all that in mind, we are now going to what is really topical at the moment because it's the event that's happening. It happens every 4 years. Everybody, it is the Olympics. So, what's galloping down the sign, Josh?
Well, apparently the pale horse of death greeted everybody during the Olympics opening ceremony. This was a giant mechanical horse, the pale horse rider, as they say, who galloped on down the Seine and apparently with the Olympic flag on his back. So this was interpreted, speaking of the twits of the world, this was interpreted by the twits of the world as death joining us because of the IOC. Yes, that's the takeaway from this particular story, my friends. Death
Oh
rides with
dear.
us because a pale rider was seen on the Seine.
Oh, Lord God above. I mean, well, yeah, literally, Lord God above. It was like there was this post that I found on Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter X, that was talking about the Revelations and that extract from the Revelations and how they could connect with it. God, they'd make any connection to religion, regardless, just so that they can say something, so that they feel that we're actually getting on top of them when we're not. It's just a horse going across the same. Like,
Now,
come on.
Paris in summer is hell. I'm not gonna. Don't get me wrong, right? It's hot. It's nasty. It's disgusting. But I
Mm,
wouldn't say that pale rider is bringing hell with him, right? Get over
no.
yourselves,
Yeah.
Katrina. Where are you on this one? Come on.
I mean, gosh, I feel so deeply for the creative director, artist, artisan, whoever, or team of whoever's was in charge of creating this. I mean, this is just like a prime example of, you just make the work, you let it out into the world, and then literally so many people can have such different just visceral reactions to it. I mean,
Mm,
it's such a far stretch. Like, I don't know. The minute I heard this, I was like, hang on. White horse. I mean, of course, I'm not like deeply indoctrinated into a religion. So maybe, I mean, this is really what it comes down to. If you've grown up with these stories and being able to quote the Bible in this kind of way, for them, it makes sense. It makes total sense. For me, I was just like seeing the most plain stereotypical symbolism of what a white horse represents: freedom, courage, strength,
mm.
purity. Like, did we forget about all of that? The
No, no,
maiden
no, no.
riding away on a white horse. Like, how is that, a sign of death and like violence? And so I'm on a completely other end of the spectrum of what that symbol represents for me.
Ugh.
So yeah, I just kudos to, I mean, anything you make, essentially, anyone can have any type of
There,
reaction in whichever direction to it.
there was a
Just,
line that
my
I
heart
read
goes out to
about
them.
this, and it said, "If you ask me, the elites of this world are showing who they really are, bringing the apocalypse closer." And I just think, I think, Katrina, what you said there is exactly the
Wow.
way we need to see it. That it is positive. It is about hope. It is about purity. It's about rebirth. It's about taking things in stride. But no, we're going to go to the negative straight away, because it's easier to do that. Let's not see how things could be done. And is that not like incredibly, like, if you were to think of somebody who's quite spiritual, generally they are positive people, or they want to
Mm.
see where there's optimism in there. But no, religion goes to the negative all the time.
Well, some religions, not all, but certainly
Well,
this
yeah.
particular one that
Well,
we're
there are,
talking
yeah,
about does.
yeah, sorry, that was a very generalization, apologies. But maybe not religion, but people who are within some religions tend to take that kind of attitude all
Extremists.
the time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Extremists.
And this is
extremists.
already like a second offense in terms of people seeing religious iconography and the
Yes.
events of celebrations that have occurred at the Olympics. So, they will find a way. Oh, they will find a way. I'm really eager to hear some kind of statement, and I haven't seen so far, but really from the
No, I haven't
makers,
found
from
any.
the creative,
Mm.
what were they thinking? Because I think they would they could clarify things, but I also, yes, as I said previously, I feel for them in terms of like having to stand up for what you've made and kind of defend it.
Mm.
Like, I mean, come on, at the end of the day, I bet when they saw all this stuff happening on X, imagine you're sitting at home in your kitchen and you made this horse and people are going off on the internet how it's about death.
They're,
Like, that would
no,
have
they're
ruined
like, oh,
somebody's
please.
dinner, I'm sure. Like, that was not nice. So I feel for them.
But
Whoever
that,
you are out there, me in
yeah,
little old Latvia, I feel for you.
people have too many opportunities to say with how they really feel, and that this is what happens when you do that. I mean, we're also guilty of this, but
I love that.
it's
I
like,
was like, are you talking about us? Is this like a
yeah.
literally sitting here?
But it's like what happened in Whitney, the Whitney, like the Whitney Museum, or the statue that we were witnessing that was decapitated quite recently. Like, it was the same
Mm.
thing. They made it about religion again. They made it about their own beliefs, and it's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to
That was
do
the
with it. This
University of
is
Houston. That was the
Houston.
University of Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ah,
So, flipping now to the other Olympic story. I don't
yes.
know that I don't know
The
if many people knew this. I know I did not know this, but from 1912 until 1948, there was art in the Olympics, and not as like, hey, there's art at the Olympics. No, there was actually art in the Olympics, and there were different categories, including architecture and graphic design, and painting and sculpture. And the only criteria really apparently was it had to be sport related in some kind of way. And as long as that was on the table, no pun intended, then you could get a bronze, silver, or gold medal. And people did. And then in 1948, they decided we're not doing this anymore, and they struck all those medals from the record. So there's like more than
mm,
130 medals that are out in the world, but no one can claim technically for their country because they no longer count as Olympic medals at all. How's that for
yes,
some
and
weird history?
it is a bit crazy. Pharrell Williams put out a article recently, or was interviewed by the Art News, where he was kind of highlighting the need for this to come back, and was really advocating its place in the Olympics. But I think it's been really cool to look back at what has been in the Olympics historically, especially as an Irish person, to see the likes of Jack B. Yeats' artwork in it, as well as some really cool female artworks. Including that of, I think I have it here as well, this piece here. And I think, Katrina, you found this piece from,
Yes.
I think this is back in the early 1900s as well.
Yeah, I
That
was
was from the
actually very
20s.
surprised to see because I've heard obviously like going to school in Ireland and like seeing the piece as well, a museum like I was familiar that Yeats was a part of, so I have heard about the arts being in the Olympics before. But then I was just like so pleasantly surprised. Okay, so Yeats received, I believe it's a silver medal,
Silver,
yeah,
yeah.
for the
Yes.
category of Olympic medalist in mixed media painting. So that was the category. And then
Mm,
a lady named Letitia Marion Hamilton received a
yes.
bronze for the category of just painting. And I was like, oh wow, like how come we don't talk about her, in history of art Olympics in terms of in relation to Ireland. So that was just like a pleasant surprise for me to discover. And also, what a bummer that all those medals are just like, essentially non existent. Let's just strike them.
Yeah.
Whatever reason they had for canceling it, like things
Mm,
change politically, whatever. It happened. There's no turning back the time. We can possibly maybe advocate for bringing it back. But why on earth would you just like delete this like entire history of all these people? Like over 100 medals, like over 100 people got recognition for their skills, their craft, and to just press, delete. That's it. Never happened. Oops, sorry. Just take it away. That's so
mm,
rude. Like that's what actually bothers me more than the fact that the
Yes.
arts were like canceled. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, the memory hole part of it, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely the part that aggravated me the most. And I mean,
mm,
they gave medals for like for landscape design. They gave medals for like urban design, like things that we would think of today as things that are just part of the everyday existence. They were recognizing these things as a place of excellence, and then it just
mm,
disappears, right? And I think it's the
yeah.
disappearing. You want to take because sports come, sports go. What we decide to celebrate, whatever, right? It happens all the time in the Olympics, so that doesn't bother me. But we don't say, "Oh, we no longer do this sport, so those medals no longer count."
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
No, we say, "No, those medals still count." Like we did this for a while. We didn't write it out of history, and this
Yeah.
was literally kind of doing that, which is just seems very odd in the context of the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the rings are supposed to represent where all of us live on all the continents, and that's why there's all the colors and all the peoples. And well, actually,
Mm.
no, some of that we're
Mm-hmm.
just gonna forget.
And yet they rely on the arts and in general for their opening ceremonies, for their closing ceremonies, for everything that happens in between the different events. From music to digital art. I mean, you see the amount of stunning projections that were created, to the sculpture that we just saw, to there's such a reliance on the arts to make it happen, and yet why can't we award that, and why can't
Mm-hmm.
we celebrate it and just say that this is part of that whole culture, it's part of that whole experience. um
Definitely.
I'm,
Yeah.
Yes, there's
Even
an
like
yeah.
Oscars, there's
visual
an Emmys.
branding. Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Go ahead.
Yeah, like I was just gonna mention, there has been some tea in terms of like the graphic design world and discussion of the new symbols for the Olympics, because apparently they created symbols first time. Was it the 60s or 70s when they were in Tokyo? I'm not quite sure. I'm not
Yes.
like an Olympics
Yeah.
fanatic, so
It was
somebody
Tokyo.
check me on that. Yeah, and that was the first time, because obviously most of the world would not be familiar with the language, so they were like, okay, we need visual guides that we can put in metros and stations and everywhere, that's just like a little symbol, like a person, I don't know, hitting a ball, that's clearly volleyball, and like a little arrow, and you go that way. So they did that, and these symbols, obviously, whenever the Olympics come back, they're rebranded to fit the aesthetic of the host country and then the whole theme that's happening that year. And this year,
mm,
actually, interestingly, the symbols, for the first time, there's like this argument in the graphic design world of, have they become obsolete? Because essentially we all have, phones, Google Maps, Google Translate, and the symbols, if you look them up, like what they look like this year in Paris, they're the first time where there's a complete absence of a human figure. So they only include the sport kind of objects, like the balls and the sticks and whatever, or like details of the tracks or the environments where they take place, whether it's water or grass or like a field or track running. And yeah, there's a complete, like, there's not even a hand or like a foot, for example, for football, you would see like. So this is the first year that they've done it without any inclusion of like human body parts, which then is like, also, are they trying to be inclusive because of also Paralympics, to be kind of sensitive of anybody can participate, it doesn't have to be
mm,
whatever body part that we decide is stereotypically fits within the symbol. But at the same time, they also made them very French, in that, like, France is the origin of the Baroque. They're just extravagant and over the line at all times. So they created these symbols that are, like, very much looking like kind of like coats of arms. They're very mirrored, and they're very, like, they look very unusual. So yeah, if you want to look into the whole graphic design art world tea in terms of the symbol uses for this year's Olympics.
It sounds really interesting, and definitely worth looking at. So I think that's really cool, and a good way to kind of finish up on our Olympic story for today. I'm sure we can look back on this again in a couple of weeks and just see where things are going in the Olympic world. But for now, we're going to just swiftly move into your own practice, Katrina, and just see what's happening with you at the moment. If you want to give us a quick update of where you're at right now, what's happening in Katrina Tracuma's studio.
Yeah, what's happening in this side of the world. Well, I'm currently preparing for a new reimagined reiteration of my piece that I did at Museum in May. My performance with my trash mountain and trash
Yes.
objects and memorabilia. So all of that is now going through a process of kind of reimagining, recycling, remixing, and it's going to be as a new performance that's also going to be educational. So it's going to have a different twist to it. It's going to be possible to see it live in Riga. It's happening on the last Saturday of this month, so the 24th of August. And you can look up, there's Riga Svatki, which is the Riga celebrations, which essentially are lasting like a whole of summer. But you can look up the schedule on that official website. And if you're in Riga in the Baltics, please come along and see me on stage live. Yeah,
Is that
nervous,
is
but
Is that going
doing
to
it.
stream?
Is it going to be
Are you
streamed?
Are you going to stream it at the same
That's a
time,
good
or is it only
idea.
going to
I'll
be
try
live?
to figure that out. Because, yeah, the museum one I
Yeah.
did get streamed. So that's actually, thank you for reminding me, Josh. That's
Sure.
helpful. Because, yeah, should think about that.
That's great because I mean we have audiences all around the world, so I mean it'll be great to get that out to everybody, and we'll put a link to that in our bio for this episode, and you'll see it on our Nua Collective website as
Thank
well.
you.
You're doing some other work as well for with a few cows, I believe.
Yeah. I've been keeping to my schedule of painting this summer, and this piece that's also available on the Nua website that I created in June is an ode to my kind of continuous admiration of Rosa Bonheur. I've been like really a huge fan of her work since I discovered her during my bachelor's course. And so when I received a prompt from the Art of Compassion Project, which is also an international collective of artists, but they all get us together on the same theme of us being activists in terms of animal rights and creating vegan artwork. And we make exhibitions and stalls and all sorts of campaigns online and in real life all throughout the year. So this newest venture is another cookbook, which this illustration is for. So I was responsible for creating the visuals for a recipe that includes jackfruit as a substitute for cow flesh. So I've decided to take these two separate works by Rosa Bonheur of like this close-up of a cow and then this study in oil paints of a cow in a field that she did, and then merged them and imagined that they were like in this grove of jackfruit trees. And essentially that was my whole motivation. Yeah, and I really wanted it to also be quite vibrant and lustrous with the colors. So I used these acrylic inks that I'm obsessed with, and I can't wait to
Not
see it in
arsenic.
print. No, definitely not. Water-based, safe to inhale and work with.
How cool. That's really cool. And you can, as Katrina has quite rightly said, you can check that piece out on nuacollective.com/Katrina Tracuma. So do check it out, and if you want, buy it because it's amazing.
Buy art from living artists. Buy art from
Yes.
living artists.
Oh my god, you sounded like a siren there, Josh.
Buy art from living artists. Do it.
We need to record
Okay,
this
and-
as like a ringtone. So anytime our phones ring, anybody in the vicinity just hears Josh's voice.
Buy art from living artists.
Yes.
Okay, we've moved to the Muppets now, Josh. So, I mean, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. But thank you for spilling the RT with us, Katrina, once again. And we'll be having you back, that's for sure, in the future. But for now, remember, everybody, you need to like, subscribe, and share this video with all of your friends and family. Do get them to come check out the Nua Collective website at www.nuacollective.com and follow us on all of the social platforms you could possibly think of, because we are there, even actually recently on Pinterest. So look there too. So yeah, check us out at Nua Collective Art. Josh, any remarks before we leave?
Thanks, folks. Been good to have you, Katrina. Always pleasure.
Thank you.
Eamonn, we made another episode. Episode 12 is in the
Another
books.
episode. That's it. We're done. So until next time, we will see you soon. Start spilling the RT.